Welcome to episode number 34 of Talking Mopars and our third installment of Direct Connections, the special editions of this podcast where we talk Mopars with other Mopar enthusiasts. My guest today is someone who I consider to be the modern Hemi swap guru. He's one of the front runners when it comes to swapping modern Hemis into old Mopars. He founded DIYHemi.com, and his mission is to Hemi swap the world. Joining us today on Talking Mopars Direct Connections is my good friend, Blake Andermann. So without further ado, if you are a Mopar enthusiast, then you are in the right place. Don't go anywhere. You're tuned into the best Mopar enthusiast-driven podcast on planet Earth, and I am your host, Chris Albrecht, better known as the Mopar Hunter, and this is Talking Mopars Direct Connections.
You're listening to Talking Mopars with the Mopar Hunter, your direct connection to all things Mopar.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my friend and the founder of DIYHemi.com, Blake Andermann. Blake, how's it going, buddy?
Going good, Chris. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good, man. Hanging in there. The world is a little crazy right now, so I'm just staying home and keeping myself and my family out of trouble and safe. But how's things down in Louisiana?
Doing really well. The weather's been nice. Not too much rain. A lot of wrenching time. A lot of time in the shop. So I'm definitely enjoying that. And not having to really get sidetracked. You know how that gets.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, you are the owner and founder of DIYHemi.com, but before we get into all that fun stuff, one of the fun things about Mopars for me is always the story behind.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's got a Mopar story, how they got involved into Mopars and what sparked their interest in Mopars. So Blake, tell me what sparked your interest in Mopars. Have you always been a Mopar guy, or is that something that kind of got sparked later on in life?
That's a good one. So yeah, I would say I've always been a Mopar guy, but that's not the truth. So there's a stranger among us, right? So coming up, my dad and he was never a Mopar guy. He was always a GM guy, and he really wasn't a car guy at all. He just always drove a GMC truck. That was his thing. Don't bring a Dodge home. That was his saying is, and well, my mother very kind of the opposite of that, right? So my mother, when I was very, very young, and actually before I was born, she was an admin associate at a Dodge dealership. So she actually wrote invoices and did all the ordering for vehicles at a local Dodge dealership, Plymouth dealership. And her first car was a 1974 Plymouth Barracuda. So she was a Mopar person. My dad wasn't, but she kind of didn't bring it up too much, and my passion really started, I would say, when I was about 8 years old. So a little known fact is when I was young, I actually had cancer, childhood cancer, and I lived for about 2 years at St. Jude's Children's Medical Hospital there in Memphis, Tennessee. It was pretty rough, Back then, it's not nearly anything like it is now. You go and you see the infomercials, and if you go visit the hospital, I do that frequently. I'll go maybe every couple of years and help what they call it's a long-term follow-up study. They examine past patients that have been cured and have moved on with life. And back then, it was very gloomy. It was a very cold and dark hospital. It had like black marble walls, and to do anything to keep my mind off of treatment, I just love cars. It was in my blood, and my mom would give me stories about her Plymouth Barracuda and how she would, drive all over the South and go to the beaches in it and how much fun she had in it and just reminisce, and that distracted me enough to where I just really became fond of the e-body. And it's like, oh man, I want one of those. If I ever get out of this hospital bed, when I grow up, I want to get one of those, So that's kind of how the Mopar bug started with me. It's a little bit grim, little doom and gloom, but I wouldn't change it for the world. Here I am now and knee deep in Mopars, and I love it.
Absolutely. That sounds like a really, I actually listened to your interview with Rob Kibbe from the Muscle Car Place, and I got a little taste of that. I'd never listened to the first interview you did with him, but I did listen to the second one. And, that anytime anyone survives something like that, cancer, all these other types of illnesses that could be terminal, that's just, an amazing story of strength and overcoming, an obstacle. So congratulations on that. I'm happy to hear that you're here with us today.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, those kinds of stories are really powerful because there's a lot of people that don't make it out of those situations, obviously. And when you do, what you make of your life after that, says a lot about a person because, you can go a lot of different ways. A lot of people fall into the depression, but it seems, I don't know you too well on a personal level, but you seem to be a very happy guy and you seem to have a positive outlook on things. So that's commendable. I commend you for that.
Well, thank you. It's one of those things that I've just learned to embrace it. And, you can go either way. Just like you said, you can kind of spiral out into depression or you can make the best of things and move on. And, thankfully I had, my parents by my side, and it was always, not if, when we get out of here. Right. And so that determination, that fire to just never give up is, that's what I still use today in everyday life. And the DIY Hemi, that's some of that fuel behind me, just don't give up. You could figure it out. We can make our way through this. And, the passion, so that's part of my DNA. That's part of my makeup. That's why I do what I do.
Awesome. Yeah. 8 years old, man. Gosh. At 8 years old, I don't even remember what I was doing, but it definitely wasn't battling anything like that, man. So my hat figuratively off to you. Yeah, crazy story. So you're young, you get out of treatment and you're on the mend. You've made a recovery.
Mhm.
At what point do you get your first Mopar? When do you realize that dream?
Okay, that's a good one. So this is actually a fun story, Chris. So I'm in high school, and I'm just looking at Mopars, love them to death, right? Whatever I can find out there, I gravitate towards it. So one of my best friends in high school, still my best friend to this day, he was a Mopar guy, and he had a 1965 Plymouth Barracuda, and that was his daily driver. I can remember us being young, going to the local football games, going out on the town, 17, 16 years old, and we're out one night, and the drum brakes failed on it. We just kind of coasted through a red light, and we were just it scared the tar out of us, but we were just happy to be in a Mopar, man. We were just riding around. And I'll never forget it. One day we're out riding, and I see it. It's a 1972 EV2, so, tour red Plymouth Duster. And I see it sitting on a curve, and the guy wants $1,500 for it. So it's a 318 car, automatic on the column, nothing fancy, bench seat. But he was just so enthralled with it, and he was very proud of the car. It needed a lot of work, but it ran, no big deal. I get to talking with the guy, and he just enamors me with the weirdest stories. And he tells us, okay, look, you see these rear windows, the quarter glass on those A bodies of that year, they had the lever where the quarter glass would kind of pop out, right? So he's like, now let me tell you something. This 318 Magnum is faster than any 340 out there. It's faster than a 426. And you know why these windows pop out? That's for high speed stability. And my friend Cody and I were looking at each other. We're just like, oh my God, is this guy for real? So we're looking the car over, and he just continues to spew this stuff out. And we get around to the back of the car, and the guy had taken from Walmart. He'd taken mailbox letters, the adhesive stickers that you find, maybe in the hardware aisle, and he'd written across the back of the car, "Trick or treat." And he said, "Man, trick or treat! This is the fastest car in the whole area." And oh my gosh, it was one story after another. It's like, is this guy for real? Is this guy really for real? And he was. It was amazing. We settled on a price. I bought the car, I think, for like $1,300. I brought it home, tore into it, and that's when I found it was pretty much a bone stock 318 with like a comp 268H cam, and some like a 4,000 RPM stall. Like you would almost have the gas pedal to the floor before before this thing would take off and get going down the road. It was a whiplash. I think would have been a more appropriate name for the car. But it was fun, man. I was just so happy to be in a Mopar. That was my first one.
How long did you have it? Do you still have it?
I had it for about 2 years. I don't have it anymore, mostly because at the time I was young. I just didn't have the technical skill set to really repair it, like the floor pans. I remember cutting the floor pans out one night to do the sheet metal replacement, and I caught some like carpet jute on fire, and it was a whole like a fire extinguisher episode, and uh, I just I tried, but I wasn't there yet. It was too much of a project for me, so I decided to let it go.
So now you have a CUDA, correct?
I do. I have my. This is my fourth Barracuda.
Okay. Let's go to your first Barracuda.
Okay.
Start with how long after the Duster did you get back into another Mopar?
Oh, years. So I went to after graduating high school. I worked my way as a mechanic, like 30, 40 hours a week, and put myself through college. So I was trying to do as much as I could just to get through college. So all my money and focus was going into that. And it took a long time, so I'm not a very smart fella. It took me 8 years to get through college and get my mechanical engineering degree. I did that. And as soon as I graduated, it was like 2010. I said, okay, I did it. I didn't give up, got my degree. I had my degree hanging on the wall, and I was still, a mechanic turning wrenches before I was able to place into a chemical industry job out in South Texas, just south of Houston. And as soon as I got settled in South Texas, man, I started hitting Craigslist. What can I find? Got to get an e-body. Got to get an e-body. And I stumbled across this guy in Victoria, Texas. I think his name was Johnny D. He used to own, I think it was called Dr. Mopar of South Texas or something like that. It was a salvage yard guy. And I didn't know much, I was still in, my mid 20s. I didn't know what was going on. I just knew I had to have an e-body. I've always wanted one. So I found his ad on Craigslist, and I drove out to Victoria, Texas, middle of nowhere. And I saw this car for the first time. It was just a shell. I mean, it had no suspension, no front suspension, no rear suspension. It was just a shell. And it was, I think, an A5 car. It's like that silvery color. I don't remember what the name was. It was a 1973. It was originally a 340 AC car with like the black vinyl top, black side stripe. Well, that's what it was anyway. But it was a complete rust bucket. I think I bought it for $1,500. And I remembered having to get floor jacks under the car and back the trailer underneath the body just to try to drag this car home, right? It was just a complete piece of junk. And so I did that, and then came time to get the title and do the paperwork. So I went into his house there. It was on the premises of the junkyard, and we started to do the paperwork, and it should have struck me as odd, but he hands me the VIN tag in an envelope with the title, and I'm like, why is this not on the car? Like, what? Why did you? And it has the rosette rivets and everything, So I didn't think of it that much. We did the paperwork and came home with the car. And while I was there, he shows me he has an FY1 yellow AAR CUDA sitting there in his personal stash, and I became enamored with it. I was like, oh, this is so cool. I would love to have one of these days, and one of these cars one day. But I never thought it would be possible, right? That's kind of like unobtainium, like a superbird, right? So I get home and I start doing the paperwork, and because from Texas to Louisiana doing a transfer, and I'm looking at the thing, and I said, well, okay, let me do a little research on this car. I want to make sure I know what I need to do to put this thing back together. And I really start doing research. I think at the time it was CUDAchallenger.com. and I found out about body stampings. So I looked at the cowl, I looked at the radiator panel, and the numbers do not match. I'm like,
Oh no.
what? What? So, so I get up my camera out. I had taken a walk around video of the car, the first inspection, the time when I went to go inspect it, and I'm looking at it, and sure enough, the door tag was completely intact. The sticker in the door jamb was completely fine. And when I went walk out at the car, it had freshly been like ground off with like an angle grinder. So
Oh man.
I think he knew he was selling me a VIN swap car. All the telltale signs were there, and man, my heart sank. I was like, I can't do anything with this car. This is a fraud. It's worthless. It's a VIN swap. That's bad news, right? So
Yeah.
I set it out to pasture, and hit Craigslist up again, right? And I found in Atlanta a very early production 1973 Barracuda, plain Jane, no AC, not probably the slimmest fender tag I've ever seen in my life for any Mopar. No options. And it was just a shell too, but dang it, I had $600 in my pocket burning a hole. I loaded up the truck and the trailer, and I drove 10 hours to Atlanta. So I bought this car, and it was the scheduled production date, I think, was like the first or second day for 1973 models in 72. I got that car, drug it home. I was like, well, this is a good, clean car, good, clean title. Let me put the best pieces onto this one and build it. And, life kind of got in the way, and it kind of sat on the back burner while I did work for money, just trying to raise money to fix up that red car, the 73 I bought out of Atlanta. And another one. It was a lot of work, but it was what I could afford. And my wife told me, she said, look, this is your dream car. Why don't you take a step back, really save some money, and just go get a more solid car, get a better car? And again, this was kind of before the whole Facebook marketplace and stuff, right? So hit my go-to Craigslist. And I saw a guy out of Dallas selling a 1970 Plymouth Barracuda Grand Coupe. So it had AC power windows car. Very rare to have the power windows. Completely intact. Everything was there. 318 a car again, but I didn't mind. I knew that I wanted to, put late model Hemi in it. And I set off for another 10-hour drive. Drove all the way up to Dallas, and looked at the car. It was everything that had described, and we struck a deal. So I brought it home, and I remember doing the paperwork on his pool table in his game room of his house. And his house was like an abandoned warehouse, if you will, that he had a living quarters in. And he said, well, since I know you're a good guy, and I know that you love the AAR and you want to do a clone, maybe I can give you some motivation, is the way I think he worded it. So I looked at him and my friend who had taken the road trip with me. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, follow me. We went through like a hole in the wall, and it was Mopar heaven. I'm not joking. It was crazy. So we go into this shop, and there's a wall torn down. And the first thing I see is like an Alpine white. I think it was a 70 Charger, and green interior it was a big block AC car. I remember that. And he had just kind of finished wrapping up that restoration. And he said, step with me through this, literally like a hole in the wall with torn down cinder blocks. We walk into the next room, and there's two AARs. There's another Grand Coupe. There's 2 or 3 other Barracudas. Quite a few B bodies, 2 A12 track pack cars, one in butterscotch, one in, I think it was another yellow car. I don't remember exact color.
Oh,
And
man.
I'm looking around, and it's overload. It is Mopar overload. I'm looking at all these B bodies and E bodies, and I'm just like, what? Like, holy geez, just looking around. And I can remember kind of glancing up on the pallet racks he had in this old warehouse. And at the top of the pallet rack, I see a nose cone. And I'm like, wait, why do you have a nose cone up there? Like, what? And I just remembered talking to him. He's, to my left side. And I said, you have a nose cone? Like, what? And totally oblivious, right? Totally oblivious. Right in front of me, he just tells me, he says, Blake, look down. Right in front of me, 3 feet in front of me, I see this big car cover, and I follow it from my right to my left, and I'm watching the body lines. All of a sudden, it dips up into this huge wing, right? I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. He reaches over, pulls the cover off. He bought it, I think, in like 1985 for, not much money back in those days. It was another EV2 Roadrunner Superbird. It was a 444 speed with black vinyl top and white interior. And the only thing wrong with this car was the nose cone. I think it maybe hit a deer or something, and that was the only thing. Everything was OE 100% gorgeous, right?
Wow.
So my heart's beating at this point. I'm like, hey, can I touch it? Like, can I just touch it? Is this real life, really? And so we've been friends ever since. And I came home, started working on that car, the Grand Coupe I bought from him. Years passed, 7 years passed. Life with kids, and really trying to work as hard as you can to get your project going. And he kind of posted up another car for sale here recently. It was this past October, and it was an AAR, one of his AARs. He had actually picked up another one, so it was his third in his collection, and he had it for a fair price because it was non-numbers matching. Just had a regular 340 thrown in it. It had been laid up for quite some time. It needed a lot of work, a lot of elbow grease, but it was a true J-code car. And I talked to my wife, my rock, and I said, man, that Grand Coupe I have needs a lot of body work. It needs a lot of time. What do you think about me selling that car and going after this one? And she agreed. So we struck up a deal. He delivered it to my house. I was pretty busy with work at the time, and I was able to sell my Grand Coupe to a friend of mine and kind of offset the cost. So for less than it would have cost me to have a paint job put on my Grand Coupe, now I have this AAR. I'm like, holy geez, like, is this real life again? I have an AAR. How is this possible? For someone who grew up like me, you just really didn't have a whole lot, but here it is. And what do I do with it? Well, obviously, first thing, let's get it running. Let's get it going. We got the 340 up and running. It was doing pretty good. It was tired, low compression, not very fun to drive around in. It would stall out a lot. And I just was, man, I got to do something better than this. I really can't afford to go, with the 346 pack right now and try to hunt all these parts down. It did come with the original 6-barrel intake manifold. It came with the TA heads, but the block was long gone. And mismatched tires. One was like a wagon wheel, one's a Steely, just a project car, right? And luckily, my friend that wanted to buy my Barracuda Grand Coupe, he's more of an old school guy. He said, look, I have a couple Mopars. I have wheels and stuff. Why don't you give me a little bit better price on the car? And you can take the Gen 3 Hemi out of it, and all that work that you've done, just put it in the AAR because it's dependable and running. Like, just go to town with it, and let's work the deal that way. So that's what I did. I took the Gen 3 Hemi swap. Everything was a direct bolt-in, no holes drilled, no cutting required, and just have been working on it ever since. And now I'm just excited to be driving around in a Mopar.
Okay, there's a couple of things I need to digest here for a minute. What is it?
Digest away, Chris.
What is it with some? I always hear these stories, and there's always these. I say this lovingly. These crazy Mopar guys that just have a hole in the wall. You go through a hole in the wall, and then you run into a treasure trove of Mopars. That's like the stuff that I dream about. And I don't know. I always hear these stories about these Mopar guys that just have weird setups and they just have these hidden collections. I say it all the time. I wonder how many of these collections are actually out there that nobody knows about. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's the thing. Nobody knows.
It's just,
We are a secretive bunch. It's weird.
I'm excited knowing that there's stuff out there still to be found, because sometimes, like, I think, oh man, all the good stuff has been found, and then just jump on Facebook or Instagram and you see all these guys pulling all these cars out of the weeds, and it's like, man, I mean, the hunt is on all the time.
Yeah,
And that's really cool. uh, an A12 butterscotch car, that's nice. I like that.
it was gorgeous. It was so gorgeous. Yeah, I thought you would like that. They were sitting side by side too, almost like bragging, you know?
I'm not kidding when I say I probably would have dropped to my knees going into that hole in the wall, and I probably would have just, I don't know, I would have had a come to Jesus moment or something right there. I don't know. That's just
I
uh
didn't expect it. I totally did not expect it. And, I'm sure he's moved on from now and he's, probably in a different place, or I don't even know if he has any of those cars anymore or whatever. But he, I was very excited that he showed that to me. That's as
yeah,
a Mopar guy, that's like a gift. A lot of our kind, the Mopar people, as I call it, are very secretive.
they are.
I can remember going to one guy's house just to get a center console, and I pulled up to his house, and he said, "Okay, you stand here," and it's right at the entrance to his huge barn. And he's like, "You stand right here." And opens the barn door barely enough for him to squeeze in. He just like wiggles in sideways, goes in, grabs the console, comes out, wiggles in, and like slams the door real, real fast right behind him. And I'm just like, "Well, guy, like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it. You want your privacy. All right, that's fine." But we have a tendency to be a weird bunch at times.
And you kind of understand these guys, because a lot of them, there's the types of Mopar guys that are really open and really want to show you everything they have because it's so cool. And then
Yeah,
there's the guys that have been insulted so many times by the people lowballing them. "Oh, what are you going to do with that? I'll give you $300 for that Super Bird." And after a while, that's got to get annoying. You know what I mean? I
oh
know if I
yeah,
had sitting on one side of the fence, I could go, okay, maybe I'm the guy who has a 1970 Superbird and I've had it since new or close to new, and it is the best thing I have in my life. The one thing that I know has extreme amount of value, and I love it, and I could never rebuild it, but I could never let it go because I know that that is the treasure of my life. And everybody's always
right.
offering you, a couple $100, and I don't blame them. Of course, sitting on the outside, I'm like, get the car fixed. You know what I mean? But I think to myself, if I had that car and I didn't have the means to have it fixed, but I knew that I had it, you know what I mean? I
Yeah,
I can relate to those types of people. But on the other hand, I'm a, no Mopar left behind guy. Save the car. Let somebody save it. Maybe they'll let you drive it when they're done, you know? So I jump on both sides of the fence, but I do like knowing that they're still out there. I love those kinds of stories. And,
yeah,
I wish I could get those types of people on the podcast to talk to them, to get inside their head and to, see what their thought process is. And I know one of these days I'm going to get somebody like that on the show, and it's going to be really interesting. But I love stories like that. And like you're saying, you go to these guys just to buy parts, and some of them, it's one way or the other. They either open their entire Mopar world to you and you're just astonished at what they have, or they're, barn door that far open and they're, squeezing in and squeezing out with parts. That's, I'm not surprised by either one of those stories. And I'm
yeah.
sure
No
every
doubt.
Mopar guy who's gone and done that kind of stuff has stories just like that. You know what I mean? Like Johnny Mopar's telling me about a guy who's got cars buried in pods in his yard. I'm like, what kind of, okay. Nothing
Yeah, I
surprises
get it.
me in the Mopar world anymore.
I just,
But
you're like me though. Just enjoy seeing it. I have so much respect for it, any shape and condition. Just for someone to allow me to take a look at their collection, their treasures. I think it's awesome.
I know that's why I respect guys like Ryan Brutt, the auto archaeologist. He goes out there and he looks at the cars, and he doesn't push as far as oh, are you going to sell it, sell it, sell it? He's about documenting them, and that to me, I love just going and looking at the collection because I know I don't have the money. I mean, even if I did have, even if the guy was like, "Yeah, here's a Superbird for $5,000," would I buy it? Yeah, I absolutely would. But I don't have the means to even. That's a situation where if I ran across a Superbird or something like that I could actually afford to buy, if the guy gave me a deal of a lifetime, I mean, I don't have the money to, rebuild the car, but I'll tell you what I would do. I would drive that sucker. I would get it going and I would just Joe Dirt it, man. I don't care. But that's Mopar guys are
That's
like
the
that.
game, man. Get out there and enjoy it.
Absolutely. I'm not interested in a car that I'm going to be sitting on for 10 years and never be able to touch. If I can't get it going quickly, then I'm not interested in it. And it's funny I say that because I've had this Dart for like 5 years now and I haven't done nothing with it, but it's getting there. I promised it's getting there. I get distracted with things. The Mopar Hunter distracted me for 5 years. And now this podcast, blessing, love it. It's distracting me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to get to my projects, but let's get back into your projects. So
Okay.
You mentioned with one of your Cudas that you had planned to do a modern Hemi swap in it. Now, is that something that just came into your mind? Had you seen other swaps being done? What sparked the whole modern Hemi swap idea?
Oh, I think that goes back to my roots. When I was in school as a mechanic, I tried not to work at just a standard, repair shop. I worked at speed shops, and here in the South, GM just really, it's huge, So I was a technician at an LS speed shop, working late model GMs back then in the early 2000s. And, on that whole explosive scene when they first came out, and, how dominant it was, and, good, reliable power, affordable power, and the ability to get in, turnkey, go wherever, the whole craze that took off. And, I knew I wanted that freedom, that reliability, that touch and go, really. And it's something you speak about all the time. I just really resonate with is get out and drive it. Enjoy the tar out of them. What is going to take this hobby and promote it to the next level? That's the kids out on the corner seeing that Mopar flinging around, and saying, "What is that? Oh my gosh, that is bad A." That's what really gets this hobby to thrive and continue to grow and get that new blood in. And yeah, so I kind of started, I was LS, I was building LS standalone wiring harnesses, swapping them into classic cars back in the early 2000s through the mid 2000s. And one thing that I took away from that is it wasn't complicated. And the LS guys, the GM guys were very open. They shared. They had web pages. They had forums. Everywhere you would go, if you need to know, hey, how do I make my tachometer work? You do a quick Google search and you may find 15 areas or websites that will tell you exactly how to do it. Hemi, not so much, And it was one thing that I remembered sitting in my apartment in South Texas when I was looking at e-bodies. I said, there's got to be a way for Mopar guys to have that same lifestyle, the ability to get in, crank it, and go, and have the great power and just the fuel economy, reliability, And I just started really researching my tail off, anything I could get my hands on. So I bought the OEM service manuals, like the 3,000-page books. I went through the wiring harnesses, and I really tried to get an idea of how these things worked to see, are they really that complicated, Anything my research found to that point, we're talking about, 2010 to 2015, 14, was it was secretive. People said, well, I just got it running. It was very private. Nobody really shared that like they did in that LS community. And that was something that I wanted to make sure that wouldn't stand to be the case for long. So I said, well, something's got to be done. And if someone has to do it, it might as well be me. So I started the DIY Hemi website, and it started very basic. I got on like GoDaddy, created a very rudimentary website, that posted the pinouts for the ECM connectors and a kind of a crude walkthrough guide on how to do the Hemi swaps. And it took off. We had a lot of positive feedback, but it quickly grew to a point where I've got to be more efficient. I've got to be leaner to answer these questions because we're getting bombarded with technical support and people asking questions on how to do things. And it really took off more than I expected it would. So that's what kind of turned it into this whole movement of it can be done. Just a simple, to compare it to the LS guys, a simple junkyard pull-out 5.7 can be had for a couple $100. A wiring harness can be built for a couple $100, and you're on the road and you're rolling, making good power for pennies on the dollar compared to building an engine fresh from scratch. There's nothing wrong with building an engine. I think that's fine. That's great. Build that old school small block Mopar, big block Mopar. I have the utmost respect for that. But when you're guys kind of like us and you don't have an endless bank account and you want to get that thing on the road and run and Joe dirt it up, man, burn the tires, light those tires over, it's a really cost effective way to do it. So we are now on our second iteration of the website, trying to advance things along.
Which looks great, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
It's great. Yeah. I jumped over there recently and I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm no computer programmer. We try, we get some tips and tricks here and there and try to pick things up. But I like the way it's turning out. One thing that really I want to see it get back to, and I'm working on it, you should see some progress in the next couple weeks, is it always started out as the subtitle says, a Gen 3 Hemi swap resource. The number one goal is not to sell products. The number one goal is not to cram down, oh, you need to buy my stuff because it's the best. The whole driving force behind the entire movement, Hemi Swap the World, hashtag Hemi Swap the World, is just get out there and let's give the GM guys some hell. Let's give the Ford guys some hell, and let's do it together. Let's quit being secretive. Let's share. How do we do this? We have a great power plant out there. We can make this just as popular. You go to any pick and pull around our area for sure, there may be half a dozen Hemi engines just waiting for the opportunity to go into something. And that's what it is. It's really about helping people to do the swaps and not be intimidated by it, not be overwhelmed, and walk through in a step-by-step process. And if there's any solutions that we could offer from our experience to make your life easier, that's what we want to do. I'm not about saying, you've got to use this from me or buy this from me. There are some really amazing vendors out there, and I think we all win together. We look at Holley, what Holley has done for the LS world. They're about to dive off in Hemi right now. They're now have a Mo Party. Did you hear about that coming up in Bowling Green?
Yes, sir. And I may or may not be talking to Holley about that on the next episode of Talking Mopars. We'll see. Stay tuned for that. But yes, in Bowling Green, Kentucky, they've got a huge show because of the popularity of LS Fest. They realized that, the Mopar guys, we're sitting here going, hey, what about us? And thankfully, Holley is, taking that into account and moving forward with, like you're saying, really diving into that Hemi world. And, we've talked about it before. There's a million of these Hemi cars that are getting ready. I mean, they're getting older, these 2006, these LX cars, we're going to start seeing them flood the wrecking yards. And I think that's when it's really going to be game on. Because up here, I see more of like the Jeep Commanders and the 1500 Rams and stuff. But it's not too often. You may see a Charger, but it's not too often you see a Hemi car a newer Hemi car, I should say, in our wrecking yards. But I expect that to change very rapidly. And hopefully I'm in a position, because, I've been following what you've been doing for a long time before I even started talking to you. And I remember when I first got on a DIY Hemi, me being the idiot entrepreneur I am, I'm like, this guy should be selling all this information. He's just giving it away. So, hey, thank you, Blake. I think everybody that's interested in these swaps owe you, a debt of gratitude, because it would be so easy for you to take all the knowledge. I mean, I can't imagine how much research you've done with this stuff, but you could take all that information and put it in ebook form and sell it. And yet you're, doing the Mopar world a great service by saying, hey, here's all the information, and you're also an open book. I don't think it's very hard to get a hold of you. And if anybody has any questions, I don't think you'd have a problem answering them.
Right.
I mean, I'm speaking for you right now, but I think you're, I do want to ask before we get too far into this, I want to ask, you said you were involved in speed shops that did LS swaps. Did that have a lot of impact on, how you approached the Hemi swap? Did it give you enough experience to go, okay, I have an idea of how these swaps are done? Did it help you having that knowledge getting into the modern Hemis?
Oh, absolutely. It definitely did. There are so many similarities between the two. It's uncanny. It really is. When it comes to the fuel systems are near identical. The way the coils and the injectors, all that works it's pretty much spot on. You take the standalone theory from GM, and then transfer it over to the Chrysler, the Mopar world, and it's uncanny how close it is. The difference is Mopar may do things in a different way, but they do the same things, if that makes sense. So when it comes to firing injectors, firing injector, all injectors are powered 12 volts from the ASD relay in Mopar, and they're always getting the 12 volts constant power, and they get fired by grounding out each individual injector. So it's all very common stuff when it comes to the fuel injection systems of GM. So it definitely helped. It definitely did.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's funny because every time you get into the argument of LS versus Hemi, the first thing that the LS guys go, and I know that the LS is a good engine. I mean, it's proven, on the track and all these cars. I have friends that have twin turbo LS cars that are, 8-second driver cars, things you'd see on Street Outlaws. They're driving down the street with a parachute, just ridiculous. And the only thing that any LS guy has ever said to me, as far as Hemi versus LS is, oh, LSs are way cheaper. That's like the only thing. So you have experience with both. How do you compare an LS to a Hemi as far as performance goes? Which is the superior engine?
Okay, well, I'll take you on a little side tangent here. So working at a GM speed shop, of course, I had a GM, I had a speed demon in me. I had to fulfill it somehow. So I had a Silverado extended cab that I did the 6-liter conversion. So that's LS base. It was the LQ4. I had stage 2 cylinder heads. I had a very hot camshaft. It was like a 228, 230 duration. I had a 3000 stall. Man, I really tweaked it up. I think it was putting flywheel like 460 horsepower. And I was proud of it. I was like, oh yeah, I have my 12-second extended cab, back in the 2000s. And I was all proud of it. And I was, at this point in time, I was going to school. I was working as a mechanic and waiting tables and bartending on the weekend just to try to feed the addiction, right? So we had a fry cook. This is the truth. We had a fry cook who had just bought, it was like a 2004 extended cab Ram with the Hemi. And he's mouthing off to me one night in the kitchen. He's like, oh man, you don't have anything on me. You don't have anything on me. Okay, well, let's line him up after work. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't know it, but he had about 150 shot on that Hemi. And he left me standing in the dust. So at that point I knew, maybe there's a little bit more of these Hemis than I'm giving credit to back then. And they can put down the power. You can really open them up. Don't be passive when it comes to them, because they're maybe not as popular as the LS.
All right, that's I wasn't sure where we were going to go with that question, and I'm glad that you weren't biased, because I know I'm not a denier. I know what those LSs can do. You know what I mean? It's common knowledge. You throw a couple turbos on them, and you're you're knocking on the door of 4-digit horsepower, if not over 4-digit horsepower, depending on, your setup. But I think that the Hemi is it just needs to get blown up a little bit more as far as the aftermarket support. And like one thing that frustrates me so much, and I see a giant gap in the market, and maybe I'm just blind and not looking in the right places, but I don't see turbo manifolds for these Hemis very often. Now, I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
if you know of somebody that has, I'm like, why, how come I can go get a few $100s gets me a set of turbo manifolds for an LS, but I cannot find turbo manifold unless you go to eBay and look at some Chinese stuff that just does not look quality at all to me. It just doesn't
Hmm.
seem it. I'm just like, where's the company that's going to say, oh, we've got turbo manifolds? I can't believe they're not there yet. I don't know why. I see a huge market for them. I really do. But
So that's you bring up a great point, and it's something I wanted to touch on earlier, and maybe it's kind of where you wanted the discussion to go. Is you know when it comes to Hemi swaps, just like anything else, it's supply and demand. If you have more persons out there doing swaps, then there's more of an opportunity for manufacturers to get out there and make those parts. So, like let's look at the Milodon, right? The oil pans that they make for the Hemi swaps. While that's one part, and the prices are kind of comparatively high when you look at an LS swap oil pan, but that's because the LS swap is so popular. They're selling them like hotcakes, hand over fist. Why is that? Well, we can all tie that back to open community sharing of how to perform an LS swap, parts availability. It just snowballs. So when we talk about Hemi Swap the World, it doesn't matter if it's a junkyard 5.7 with 200,000 miles on it and you pay $200 for it. Buy it, get that Milodon oil pan, or one of the other manufacturers now step into the game. Hopefully, Holly steps into the game, and now you have the market where it should be going. So those cheap Hemi swaps, those cheap budget builds, they're going to buy one or two high dollar parts that they need just to make it work, even though they're on a shoestring budget. And when you're continuing to expand that market and buy those things, the offerings are going to follow. So that's really what I think about is Hemi Swap the World. We win together. If I can help 18 guys junkyard swap a Hemi in their old Mopar or whatever it may be, and they buy 15 oil pans, well then there you go. The demand's creeping up. The supply should follow. Hopefully prices drop and more people enter into the market because they see the need for that product. And that's what I'm pretty excited about.
now maybe I'm encroaching on your business a little bit here, but I'm wondering if you would ever be interested in being a supplier for all these Hemi parts for these aftermarket companies, because I think they would want to partner with you in some way. Because if you're the go-to source for,
Hmm.
quote unquote, junkyard swaps or DIY Hemi swaps, I mean, call me crazy, but I think it would be smart to team up with someone like you because, hey, not only can you go to Blake and DIY Hemi for all the information you need to do this swap, but he is also a supplier and has all the parts. That's what I think that would be great because as far as when and I know I've talked to other people about Hemi swaps and your name always gets brought up and DIY Hemi always gets brought up. Everybody knows DIY Hemi. It's like I really think that there needs to be a relationship there with these part manufacturers and going back to the turbo manifold thing. I really want to turbo the 5.7 that I have because for those of you listeners out there that don't know, I actually got a 5.7 Hemi out of a 2006 Charger for $100 with blown head gaskets. And I got everything. I mean, I got the whole harness. I mean, I got stuff I don't even know what it's for, Blake. I got to be honest. I'm like, I don't know what this is. I'll take it. He's like, I went there to buy a block and he's like, I got all this other stuff too. I'm like, what do you got? And he's just handing me boxes of stuff. I mean, I got a radiator. I got, different computers. I'm like, I think this is a TCM. I don't know what this is. I'm like, yeah, just throw it in. I'm just,
Hmm.
before he changes his mind, I'm like, yeah, give me it all. Give me it all. So
Let's take it.
I get it all. And I'm like, $100. I'm like, blown head gaskets. Okay, cool. Um, so I had already discovered DIY Hemi long before I got this Hemi. But the problem was in my area, $100 5 points, $100 block for a modern Hemi. Good luck finding one of those,
Hmm.
and I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. I called the guy and he had a bunch of people lined up already, and I managed to be the first one there. I said, "Hey, I'll come get it right now." I kind of lied to him because I was still at work, but I was like, "I'll come get it right now. I'm on my way." He's like, "All right," but I got people lined up. I was like, "I got cash in hand. I'm looking at the $100 bill right now." I was bullshitting him. I was like, "I need to try to get off work early. Get off work early." I go over there, and it turned out that he had a Chrysler 300, had well over 200,000 miles on it. It was a rough looking car. That engine blew. And then he went to the wrecking yard, got this 2006 entire setup from a Charger. I don't know if he bought a whole car and just parted it out or what, but everything is from an '06 Charger. And from what I understand, he was basically put the engine in his 300 and it blew the head gasket. So he yanked everything out and was just parting it. And I was like, okay, the only thing I really didn't get was the transmission and the exhaust manifolds, but everything else seems to be complete. $100. I was like, all right, well, I guess if I needed to sell some of the parts off this thing that I don't need, I could probably make my money back. You know what I mean? The only thing that going through all your information on the website was the golden part, the bell crank. And I was like, okay, so I started searching all the local wrecking yards for a 2003 Dodge Ram, and I found one that had it. And I made the mistake of going to this wrecking yard, and the guy's like, that's kind of he kind of basically, a little runaround of, that's kind of a weird thing. What do you need that for? And I was like, oh, dude, Hemi swap, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, really? And I think he hosed me on that thing because I spent like $260 on it. I was like, oh God. I was like, all right, well, but it wasn't a pick and pull. Like they had to go pick it for me. That's the only one that I could find. Yeah. And I was like, I probably would have did better online.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing. That's the most expensive part of my whole Hemi swap probably is that stupid. But I have it. I don't know. I didn't want to deal with the fly-by-wire pedal thing kind of weirded me out. So I was like, how can I go around that?
Yeah.
So we'll go with that. But yeah, I got hosed on that. I'm going to go ahead and ask you, how much can you get those things for?
$12.
Oh, man. Oh, man. Yeah. Yep. Ouch.
Did you sit on something? No, it's, I'll drop you a little, that's okay.
My heart hurts.
I'll drop you a little knowledge here for your listeners. So, in the research, if you actually look at some of our YouTube videos, we have kind of a review of that bell crank connector. And keep in mind, in the early 2000s, Daimler owned Chrysler. So the Hemis were actually developed by the Germans. So if you look at that bell crank sensor, if you take it out of the box, the actual, what they call it, the APPS, the accelerator pedal position sensor, you take it out, it's got a Benz logo on it. Okay. It was used, the actual sensor, the bell crank sensor was used on probably 15 different Mercedes-Benz of the same time frame. So if you're in a salvage yard and you don't find one in a Ram truck, go look at the Benzes. Just go out there and you'll find one. Now the linkages, the box is shaped a little bit differently, but it still works. It's still a 6-pin accelerator pedal position sensor. Most picket pull yards down here, we grab them every time we go, and typically $12 to $15 is what we get for them. We clean them up, test them. A lot of times on eBay they go for $200 to $300. We try to just help the community out, and we sell it for between $75 and $100, just because it's something we know people need, and we have to pay the time it takes us to go out there, right? So we're in the early stages of the business. We're migrating from, how do we continue to help the community and provide the support? And the answer is we need to do more research. We need to figure out the next generation. So, we have everything figured up through the Hellcats now. And how do we do that? We do that simply by buying salvage cars and taking them apart, figuring out how it works. And that's why we do what we do as far as sales goes. So a lot of it just goes into, buying stuff so we could figure it out.
Yeah, it is all a learning process. Some of us learn the hard way by spending more money than we need to, but that's okay. We learn the hard way sometimes. Oh gosh, yeah, that's rough.
Yeah. So let's look at this. You could get it's, and this is something I want to say for you and your listeners. Knowing what I know about the LS world and how easy it is. In LS World, you can build a standalone harness for $30. Okay. The connectors are the only thing that's a little different when it comes to Chrysler. They're a little bit more expensive. But if you were to, like, say, go to our website and look at the pinouts and you were to do it yourself and use all junkyard connectors, yeah, you could do it for like $75. You can build your own Hemi harness for $75. What we offer on the website are we found those connectors, right? So we found the OEM connectors that if you go to the Dodge dealership, they want $100 just for that connector. We found the sources on them, and what we're doing is we're just trying to bring that price down. We're trying to cut that Mopar tax, and by doing so, it's getting more people into the game. And we have just the general knowledge area where you could go and just look at pinouts and really kind of, hey, this goes here, right? Or we have the technical manuals that we sell now. And the technical manuals we sell now literally tell you, using Mopar connectors, this is the most direct, simplistic way to build your own standalone harness that will save you probably dozens of hours. So that's how our business has kind of evolved, right? We still hold first and foremost, help the Mopar community get Hemi swaps popular. That's what we want to do first and foremost. Secondly is we want to continue to drive innovation by buying the next generation of materials and buying parts. I mean, I was able to buy 2 wrecked 2014 police chargers last year and really dive off into the later, like the Eagle generation of the Hemis. And it's ridiculous how much more simpler they are than, say, the 2003 through 2008. The simplicity is there, and it's something that with the guides that we sell now, the short, more direct guides, you can build your own harness in a weekend. So that's where we want it to be. We want to help the Mopar community, and we want to bring the prices down.
Yeah. So those of you out there listening, if you're interested in a modern Hemi swap, if you're even thinking about it, because I know a lot of people out there are like me and are not that technical. You know what I mean? Like when I first went to your website, one thing that I appreciated, and this was back in the beginning, several years ago. I think it might have been before I started the Mopar Hunter, which was 2015. But right around there, sometime, I discovered DIY Hemi before I ever reached out to you. And I remember just looking through it and going, okay, this is like for idiots like me that, have a really hard time following direction. I was looking, I was like, okay, all right. And then you did I'll admit, I sat there and I found your YouTube videos, and I sat there with a piece of paper and a pen, and I was like a little boy in class. I was like, okay, how are we going to do this here? All right. And it cracked me up because everything was backwards in that one video. Everything was reversed on the screen.
So horrible.
So I was like, okay, this is going to be even harder, but you got that fixed. That's a good. I appreciate that you still have that video up. It's funny.
I know. So
yeah, I thought I was going to learn. I thought I was going to have to learn it backwards.
So someone told me that, definitely leave your beginnings up there and show people how far you've come. I'm definitely not a public speaker. I think that's pretty obvious. But one thing we've discussed here recently, so I have some really good friends join me now in the business. And one thing we've discussed now is we've got to get back to those videos. We've got to get back to helping people because we get a lot of the same questions and answering the same emails, the same technical support questions. And the best way to get out there is we've got to make more videos. So we've ordered the camera equipment. You should see quite a few more posts that should come alive. I think the last time we posted a YouTube video was over a year ago, and that's just not acceptable. I know we need to push that further. We even reached out last week to the Gen 3 swap community page, like on Facebook, and said, what do you want to see? What kind of technical videos do you need? What are you having trouble with? Let us help you. Let us post a short video to kind of guide you through the process and take the mysticism out of it. Let's make sure we hit a home run for you guys and really give you something that you need.
Yeah, you guys are on the right path. I see, thankfully, a lot of the people I have on this show in the business world are on really good paths. I think DIY Hemi is going to blow up. I think it's going to be huge. And I wouldn't be surprised if you're probably going to get some a lot of calls from manufacturers because you have that experience, and you cannot beat experience in this game. And especially, like, I really like the fact that you started with LSs and you kind of cut your teeth on those and worked your way into the Hemis because, hey, for everybody out there hating on LS engines right now, just remember that if it wasn't for that experience, we might not have DIY Hemi right now. So thank you, LS engines.
That's true. That's true.
But
Thank you for that. Now
yeah,
go out and give
in
them
all
hell.
seriousness, though, if you're even remotely thinking about a Hemi swap, you have to go to DIYHemi.com and just look at it. Just be a sponge, go to all the different links, go to all the different pages, and just absorb. That's what I did because, like I said, I'm an idiot. So I go there and I try to be a sponge. And, you talk about, parts like the bell crank thing. I was like, I didn't even know what the hell that was. And you did a great job describing where it was, what it was, and things like that just really helped me get familiar with the whole thing. And it's the resource. I don't know of a better Hemi swap resource out there. I don't think there is one. So, I mean, congrats, you've cornered the market. So
Thank you.
That's a good thing.
I appreciate
it.
Well,
I can't.
We want to push it.
Yes. Hemi swap the world, people. Come on. We got to jump on board. Because
I'm sorry about that. One thing I want to add is, it's a learning process. It's a growing process. So you've definitely noticed a difference between the old website and the new website. And in the new website, to kind of foster that community, one thing we're doing is we're developing the pages. They're not up now, but we're developing we call it the Hemi Intel pages. So you'll see right now you can go to the website and sign up, and you just have to have a valid name, email address. And we get a lot of spam. So if it's just an email address or some made up name, we typically don't approve it. But if you sign up, as soon as we hit launch on the Intel pages, it's all the tips and tricks that we've kind of been discussing today. It's a online community, no BS source to get information that you're looking for and walk through. A lot of that's going to be information released before the YouTube videos. So we're trying to really help our little community by saying, hey, just join us and let's go down this road together. But if you join right now, you won't see a lot of those in-depth detailed pages that you saw on our previous website, because we're creating them in a brand new way that I think is simpler than before. So before, we got a lot of questions, and that was fine. We want to help people out, but if we can make it better and we can educate people in a more direct way to where they completely get it the first time, then it's just better for everyone all the way around. So that's what you're going to see right now when you go into the web pages. It's just this page where you could sign up. There's some links to our technical videos, but just know that once you've signed up, as soon as we hit launch, you're going to be immersed in this world of technical information that should be able to help you out in the future.
I'm pretty sure I signed up for that. I'm pretty sure I'm on that list. I'll have to.
Yeah, I think you did.
Yes. Yeah, I did. Yep.
Okay.
I got to be involved in that. I got to check that out because I've been impressed ever since I found DIY Hemi. So it's one of those things where I know that in 10 years, people are going to be talking about DIY Hemi, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I had Blake on my show, and yeah, I was there before you guys. Before you guys were all Hemi swap this and Hemi swap that. I knew Blake. Okay, I knew him before he became popular and had this TV show on TV, swapping everything with Hemis. Mm-hmm. But
oh gosh,
I did want to. I want to ask you this now. I know that a lot of Mopar guys are going to turn in their grave right now when I talk about this, but drifting and the import community. Okay, I see a lot of these guys swapping LSs in 240SX Nissans and things like that. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the Hemi is going to catch on there too? Because I'd be a liar, folks, if I didn't say, God, I would like to put a Hemi in one of those and just kind of shock that little community a little bit, because it's like, oh, you got an LS swap? Cool. Yeah, I got a Hemi. It's always cooler. I don't care who you are. It's always cooler to say that you have a Hemi. I love big block and small block Chryslers, but oh, you got a 346 pack? Cool. I got a Hemi. 440? Oh, cool. I got a Hemi. 6-pack? Got a Hemi. You know what I mean? So it's always cooler to say you have a Hemi. Do you see Hemi swaps, venturing out away from classic Mopars and into other areas of the performance world, like drifting and other things like that? Do you see that happening?
Oh yes. So we have a very big following globally. We get we get push notifications to our cell phones every time we get someone that logs on the site. Um, it doesn't give us their details of their full names or anything. It just says, "Hey, you have a new visitor from Alberta, Canada, from Sweden." Globally, we've been. Last week we had one from Japan, one from Australia, a couple from the Middle East. We get all over the world. And I remembered 2 weeks ago, I had a gentleman contact me out of Great Britain who put one in a 3 Series BMW. And he was drifting, was looking for some wiring help to just physically in the car. He's like, I just need to get the wiring done. We need to get this thing on the road and running. So 3 Series BMW, I've seen that. I don't know if you've seen here lately, there's a someone that put a 392 in a Volkswagen Beetle. It's insane. It's like the engine's like the size of the car, but it's the coolest thing. We've seen them put in there. I was reached out to this week for someone putting one
The Grand National.
The Hell National. That thing is sweet.
I think it's badass.
Isn't it though? That's a Hellcat. That's
Dude.
Crazy.
Yeah, that one really had me going. I actually followed him on Instagram because I was like, I might have to bring this guy on the show, because secretly, folks, I've always been a fan. I might get burned at the stake for this. I've always been a fan of the old GM turbo vehicles, the Grand Nationals, the T-types, and the Cyclone and Typhoon. Those, I have a special place in my heart for those things. Sorry, guys. I like them. I know they're not Mopars, but
I'm with you
cool,
on that.
Cool trucks for what they are. So anybody wants to argue that with me, you can, but I like them.
I'm with you with that. I have a friend of mine. He's really big into collecting the Hot Wheels. And I said, hey, if you get a Cyclone one, send it my way. They're cool.
Yeah.
Respect them all.
They're cool. They are cool. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I was kind of expecting the whole Hemi swap thing to start once you get into the LS stuff and you see how many cars and how many different routes that people are going with their LS swaps. It was only a matter of time before people wanted to be a little bit different and get the Hemis going. I have not seen a Hemi in any drift car yet. Now, maybe I just don't know that much, but I know that they're putting them in all sorts of other crazy stuff. So it's only a matter of time. So that's exciting. If I was you, I'd be really excited about that, because you're going to get all sorts of. You're probably going to hear from people that have really on the down low projects. Like, all right, don't tell anybody about this.
Yeah,
this is top secret stuff. So that's really cool. But yeah, you can tell me. I won't tell anybody.
The one thing I wanted to say is the prices are really coming down. And when you look at what you get bang for the buck out of a new Hemi, did you know that you could buy a crate 392 long block on Rock Auto for like $3,000?
No, I did not know that, Blake. And now that you've told the world, they're going to be sold out, and I'm probably not going to get one. No, I didn't know that. I didn't know you could get engines from Rock Auto. I really didn't. Wow.
Yes. So it's like, I want to say it was 28. Last I checked, this was about a month ago. Someone mentioned it, and I said, well, I've got to check this out. It's like 28 or 2,900, plus you have a core and shipping. So it comes out to be a little over $3,000 for a long block, 485 horsepower, 392 shipped to your door.
That's a deal. That is That's crazy deal. Wow. Yeah. Wow. I don't think
you're going to see him put in everything.
I saw yeah. That's because I saw a wrecking yard by me. I forget what it's called. They deal with classic cars. All American Classics in Vancouver, Washington. I think they had a dropout 6.1 out of an SRT8. They had a Vortex supercharger on it. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. How much? Like $10,000, $9,995 or something like that. I was like, it hurt my heart. I was like, I like Vortex superchargers just as much as the next guy, but pull that off and I'll give you $1,000 for that thing.
Yeah.
But
God,
I
that's
think
high.
there's still that dude. There's still that stigma on the Mopar thing though, where people think they got Mopar stuff, they can just jack up the price. But I'm with you. I think it's going to get cheaper. There's millions of these Hemi cars out there, so that's really exciting because that's just, I mean, all those engines in the wrecking yards. Because one thing that I'm scared of with this 5.7 Hemi that I got, because it's going to go in my little D100. I really want to turbocharge it, and I really just want to see what it can handle. And
Mhm.
if I blow it up, it was $100, except for that bell
Yeah,
crank.
that's
But we
fun.
won't talk about it again. But yeah, man, I'm gonna get it for that one. I'm never gonna live that one down. um, but yeah, I think when I start seeing these things show up in the wrecking yard, I'm gonna start swooping up on them when they're cheap, because I have a feeling that once I start playing with boost on these things, I want to see what they're capable of. One, I want to see what they're capable of with stock internals, and then, we'll see what happens when you throw forged stuff in there. But it's one of those things where you just got to learn by trying. And
That's it.
I want to know what a stock Hemi can handle as far as boost. I've heard rumors. I've heard you don't want to turbocharge the 6.4s without opening them up. I've heard the 6.1s are better for turbocharging. I've heard it all. I have a 5.7, so we're going to see what that thing can handle, but I don't know. I'm really excited. I have decided, because my Dart, I have a 451 stroker that I'm having built for the Dart. And, as time goes on, I really, really want to put a third generation Hemi in it. So I'm so deep in this big block swap that I'm just going to have fun with the big block for a little bit.
Mhm.
But now that you told me about this Rock Auto stuff, now I'm like, okay, I might have to reach out to Rock Auto and say, hey, why don't you sponsor the podcast and send me one of those long blocks?
Yeah.
I mean, they're only $3,000, right? I mean, come on.
Oh yeah. And that's a
That's
Mopar part number.
God, that's
That's
crazy.
that's Mopar part number,
Wow.
baby.
God, that's crazy.
You know.
Wow, that is insane. Yeah, man. They're gonna get their website blown up, and they're gonna be like, "Where's all this traffic coming from?"
Talking Mopars. Just let me know what type of royalty
Yeah,
check you get.
God, couple bucks. They might
Couple
send me a
bucks.
Rock Auto sticker or something. um, back to DIY Hemi. So you've kind of given us a sneak peek at what's coming. What do you see? Like, where do you vision DIY Hemi in, say, the next, handful of years? Where do you want to see DIY Hemi at?
I want to see it grow to a self-sustained business that really, I want to help people. I mean, I think if you help people, that's the number one thing that you can do as a contributor in life, So I want to see physical parts that people need, stuff that they could use in their hobbies. This is all our passion. This is what we do for fun. So I want to continue to teach people for sure. And I want to see the Hemi videos, the technical videos, to really ramp up and take off so that we're reaching as many people as possible. So that's, kind of first and foremost. Secondly, is I want to continue to develop products that I can put out there for people. So I do a lot of solid modeling, three-dimensional modeling, and prototype builds. So I would love to see this become the common namesake when it comes to Hemi swaps. Oh, well, you got to go get this part from Hemi Swap, DIY Hemi, because it just makes my life so much easier. It's worth it. I don't want to sell people stuff they don't need. I want to sell people stuff that really helps them, and I want to see the community grow. So you look at the cool guys like Mike Finnegan, all those guys at Roadkill. They go out to a car show and people just want to be around them, and they want to learn from them. That's where this has got to go. It's got to be part of the movement, part of what we're trying to do as a Mopar community. And let's put the secrecy down. Let's go out there. Let's give the bow tie guys and the oval guys some hell, and have some fun together. That's what I want it to do. I just want to enjoy it. That's really all it is.
Absolutely. You're a guy with good intentions, and I appreciate that. And I think you're doing a great thing for the Mopar community. And I really see this thing blowing up. And Yeah, I really am excited about getting this 5.7 in my truck. The problem is I have the heads over at my buddy Norm's place right now. He's the guy who is building my engine, and he's behind on my engine. Well, not behind, but let's just say that my stroker is in front of the Hemi. So now I'm like getting impatient. I'm like, all right, well,
Hmm.
I talked to Blake this weekend. Norm, I need you to, push that stroker out a little bit quicker so that I can get that Hemi in there. But man,
Start
that's
sourcing some later D100 stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I will tell you right now.
I saw the truck you guys did. That was pretty cool. Tell me a little bit about the
Yeah,
truck. How'd that come about?
so that was pretty cool. That was a local truck its whole life. It actually started out life at the dealership my mom worked at. So
Oh,
it's an
really?
88 D1. Yeah, it was an 88 D100, and it was bought brand new by a mechanic at the dealership, and he ran it for about 3 years. His friend, who is also a mechanic at the next stall over from him, bought it when the original owner traded it in. So, and that guy's had it ever since, and that was like 92, 93, something like that. He works with me at my day job, and he was discussing how his tired little 318, 300,000 miles. The truck does not look like it has 300,000 miles on it. It's immaculate. It's flawless. He just said, I want to rebuild this 318. This is the kind of money I'm looking at spending on it. What do you think? We're all car guys. And I said, I think you need to Hemi swap it. Of course, that's kind of my answer for everything that's not, high dollar collectibles. Just Hemi swap it. And I was able to get him in touch with the local sheriff's office where I went to auction and bought the police cars. He was able to get him one for very low miles for like 1,200, 1,500 bucks. And I said, you physically bolt it in. Here's a laundry list. This is what you need. You go ahead, bolt all this stuff in, and come back and see me. It had been a while since he was a mechanic, but he still has all his tools. I know he could do it. And sure enough, the truck showed up to my house, my shop one day on a flatbed, and we did all the wiring and the fuel system, and it's been running ever since. He's been enjoying it. He does need to get rid of the one wheel peel though. It kind of it leaves them them long single stripes down the road. But it was a learning curve on the 2013 because Dodge got really tricky when it comes to computer tuning. So we had to figure out what they call a start signal condition, and we got it figured out. But it threw us for a loop for a couple of weeks. We got it.
Yeah, you're a lot smarter than me. I would have been like, okay, well, it was fun. It was fun playing. I guess that's, and that's a huge thing for people out, because I know that when I even remotely thought about a modern Hemi swap, the knowledge gap for me was so big that I was like, gosh, I don't know, it's scary. So finding your website was a godsend. But I know there's people out there, even with your website out there, I see the same questions over and over again. And it's so frustrating to me because I'm like, how do you not know about DIY Hemi? And I think it's only a matter of time before you blow up even more. But I want to, just to give the guys out there, because I know there's some listening that have no idea what it takes to swap in modern Hemi and an old Mopar. So I want to give you a scenario, and I want to kind of see where this goes. So let's just say my name is Bob, and I have a 69 Coronet 318 car. It's stripped out, no engine, but I do have the small block 727 transmission in it still. Everything from the transmission back I still have, but there's nothing in the engine bay as far as it's a roller car.
Mm-hmm.
How would I go about, how would you suggest me going about putting in a Hemi, a modern Hemi, and what Hemi would you suggest? With, let's be reasonable and say that price is this is a budget build, nothing crazy. Where would you, suggest a guy,
Okay.
Start?
What I would recommend, I think, is for a budget build, it's perfect. First thing we need to take away from this specific scenario you have here is very ingeniously, the third generation Hemi has the exact same bell housing bolt pattern as all the old school small blocks from like 67 down, like the 67 340 down to like the LA blocks. It never really changed. I have a theory on that. Basically, is with each iteration of a new vehicle, Chrysler didn't build the whole powertrain from scratch. So, you had your 727s, and then Dodge or Chrysler at times says, okay, well, let's tweak the old LA blocks and let's make a Magnum block. Well, we're not going to rebuild the 727, so it still has to have the same mating surface, the same bell housing, and then vice versa. They had the Magnum 318s, the 360s, the small blocks, and then sometime in the 90s they said, well, we need to have overdrive, so now let's make the new transmission match the bell housing. So luckily, over the years of attrition, what we have now is a third generation Hemi that has the same bell housing as all the small blocks from 67 on down. So what you could do is bolt that third generation Hemi directly to that 727 small block transmission. The same thing goes for like the 3 speeds and the 4 speeds of its day. You just use the small block bell housing for the 4 speed or 3 speed. Now, that's a beautiful thing. Did you know that the third generation Hemi bell housing bolts are 3/8 thread? So the only standard bolts on the entire Gen 3 Hemi are the bell housing bolts. So you could literally reuse the bell housing bolts from that 67 Cornet and bolt it all straight together. To make the Hemi work with that 727, you would need a flex plate adapter, basically because the depth of the the depth of the crankshaft is different from a new Hemi to the old school small block. So it's a $60 or $70 flex plate that allows you to run the old school 727 torque converter. Everything bolts up. Now you need to look at an oil pan because of the steering linkage system that the old Mopars had. You need a center sump oil pan for that application. The most common for that is the Malign. I think there's Canton makes one, and there's one other manufacturer. The name escapes me. But you get that center sump oil pan with the pickup tube. And then you need the engine mounts. So TTI, I believe, makes the engine mounts for that, as well as Schumacher. There's maybe 3 or 4 companies that make the engine mounts. You reuse the same transmission mount because the same transmission's in the car. You also reuse the same drive shaft. You use the same original shifter linkages, all of that stuff original to the car. It's going to work. That's fine. So now at this point, you've purchased the motor mounts, you've purchased the oil pan and the flex plate adapter. The third gen Hemi is bolted into your car. That easy. Okay. Now what we're looking at is fuel system. So a late model Hemi requires roughly 58 to 60 pounds of fuel pressure. You accomplish that by an in-tank fuel pump. There are some companies, Tanks Inc., I believe, makes the B-body one as well as the E-body, so it physically looks identical to an original B-body fuel tank, with the exception of it has an internal baffle to prevent fuel slosh. So with an EFI vehicle, the fuel pump in the tank cannot be starved, right? So it has to have a bowl of fuel around that fuel pump suction inside the tank. So think of hitting a sharp curve and all the fuel sloshes to one side. It could starve the fuel pump and then the engine would die. What these tanks have is just an internal bucket, if you will, that keeps a concentrated volume of fuel around the fuel pump when you're going through turns. There's a couple ways you can accomplish that. You can even reuse your existing fuel tank by just drilling a 4.5-inch hole and putting like the Aeromotive Phantom fuel injection kit in there. That's kind of pricey. Budget, I would say Malign oil pan, TTI motor mounts, and then get the Tanks Inc. fuel tank, because the tank's like $200, I think, and another $200 for the fuel pump system. So, all right. Now where are we? Engine's in the car, my fuel system's ran. Now we have to look at cooling and wiring. Cooling, what I would recommend doing is going with the Champion radiator, because it has the offset hoses to the same side, which is common with the Hemi cars. It's like $200, get you a Champion radiator, or reuse the one from the donor car that the engine came out of. A lot of time those can be made to fit in those big B bodies. All right, moving on to wiring. The way we like to do the wiring systems is very budget friendly. So instead of completely rebuilding a wiring harness from scratch, what you're doing is you're adapting the existing wiring harness to work in a standalone configuration. Chrysler was very smart about this. What they did as the vehicles were coming down the assembly line is they had the engine, transmission, powertrains all together on the assembly line with the powertrain wiring harness draped over the engine. And as, like, say, the cars, as the car bodies were being dropped down on top of the powertrain, your assembly line technician had like a body connector and an ECM connector. They would just plug it in, and that's it. And the car would go down the assembly line, and that connected the powertrain to the body. So the approach we took is we said, well, why are we buying an entire $1,700 standalone wiring harness? They're beautiful. They're great. Don't get me wrong. I love the people that make them, and they're very knowledgeable people, but there's a more cost-effective way of doing this. So what we did is we sourced the body connectors, and our guides, our tutorials say, okay, get a fuse box, okay, and these wires need to go to this body connector, these wires need to go to the ECM connector, and these wires need to go to like the gas pedal and the OBD connector inside the car. There you go. So now you've shrunk down by over $1,000 the cost of your wiring harness. You plug in the wiring harness, you supply a battery, positive, 12 volts key on when you hit the ignition switch, a starter signal coming from the ignition, and you're up and off to the races.
See, a funny thing here is I've been taking notes over here, just little notes, and then I realized, hey, this is a podcast, you idiot. You're going to listen to it after this interview, so I don't even need to take notes. I don't know what I was doing. You make it sound really easy.
It's all good.
I think that's good because the way you explained it, hopefully anybody listening that's interested in doing a modern Hemi swap will realize, okay, there's not too much to it, because you start talking, I know there's people out there that don't understand that you can use these old transmissions. Even a 904, from what I understand, bolts right up. So, and the 4-speed, I know you had the 4-speed. So
Absolutely.
A pistol grip behind a modern Hemi, how cool is that? That is awesome. So I really, I'd be surprised if there are people listening to this and they don't go, oh, wow, it's really not that hard. And like you're saying, you guys offer the wire thing with me. It's all about wiring. The only reason why my D100, which is like 10 feet away right now in the garage, is not running is because those old Dodge trucks, man, they had this bulkhead connector, and it corrodes out with the ammeter and all that stuff. I won't get into that, but I decided, I've never rewired a car. I'm going to go ahead and get one of these universal wiring kits, and I'm going to rewire this truck. And I got the engine bay done. I got the wires ran through the frame, and I got into the cab. And how can I say this without making myself sound stupid? I'm stupid when it comes to universal wiring kits. And this thing is, all of a sudden, I'm like, I thought this was an English manual. As suddenly, somewhere around page 38, it turned Chinese on me. So now I'm like, all right. And it's so universal that they're showing me this Mopar, like it breaks it down. Oh, Mopar, GM, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not looking at the same stuff here. What is going on? So sometimes with projects, guys, I know there's people out there that are listening that understand this. Sometimes with projects, you just kind of have to walk away for a little bit and not be frustrated. So I need to get back in there and do that. But now I'm wondering, maybe I should have, because I'm worried when I go to put the Hemi in that this aftermarket kit, this wiring kit, is going to make my life even harder to swap this Hemi in. You don't think so?
No, not at all. Oh, no, not at all. What I really like about the modern Hemi is it is almost just begging to be in standalone configuration. And gosh darn it, they're just badass. They're cool, right? for example, the transmission, you know, you can take pretty much any Hemi, Gen 3 Hemi out of a vehicle, a donor vehicle, and make it run in standalone configuration, and it won't go into limp mode because it doesn't detect the automatic transmission behind it. All right, it doesn't operate or rev correctly because it's looking for some sort of an input from the transmission. Believe it or not, especially with the like to see 03 through the 08s, the ECM just it does its own thing. It almost like it has the blinders on. It operates by itself. So you could just give it what it needs to the ECM, the 12 volt constant, the ground, 12 volt key on, starter sense, and it just wants to run. That's what it wants. You know, it doesn't matter how your wiring harness is in that truck. It doesn't care. You could have a guy with some jumper cables and a couple rocker switches. I bought a car like that. Don't let me get into that story. But yeah, it's so simple. It really is. And I want to just break down that misconception that it's something that's rocket science. It's not. It's not rocket science at
Good,
all.
because like I think I alluded to it a few minutes ago. As far as the transmissions and stuff go, I think there's a lot of people that don't understand that they can bolt their existing transmission to these engines. So they're thinking they got to get the engine, they got to get the transmission, and then, you know, with no knowledge of DIY Hemi, they're going and looking at some of these standalone systems, and they're getting sticker shock. And, you know, for those of you out there that have been sticker shock, go to DIYHemi.com, please. I totally understand where they're coming from, because at first when I was looking into this stuff, I was sticker shock too, because for some reason I had this notion that, you know, I had to have the modern transmission and stuff too. And I just don't think that, I think people are overlooking the fact that, like you're saying, it's a lot. I mean, of course, a smart person like you who's done it many times, I'm sure it's becoming easier and easier. But for someone like me, I need things broken down. You know what I mean? I'm like, I equate it. I'm a new father. My daughter's about to turn 1, and I look at her little picture books, and I'm thinking to myself, if they had books like this on how to rebuild Mopars and how to swap in modern Hemis, I'd probably be okay. But you know, with DIY Hemi, it's just, you guys have made it way, way easier for people like me, especially because I'm just one of those people that I need, like, I know it's the manly thing to do to build stuff without instructions, blah, blah, blah. I need instructions, because even then I'm reading these instructions. I'm like, maybe the reason why people say, hey, you don't need instructions is because they're like me and they start reading these instructions. And they go, oh, well, this ain't helping me at all. You know what I mean? But I
get it. I totally get it. But if it eases your pain or your anxiety at all, let's just take a step back in history. You know, look at the 1920s. They had the Model T and how simple that engine is. Look at the 30s and, you know, our early Chryslers that we love, that are so dear to us, right? Think of being in the late 60s when the Gen 2 Hemi came about. And all of a sudden, okay, now we have electronic ignition and these things. In that same breath, back then, people were in the same mindset. Oh, what's this new stuff? It's so complicated. What do you mean electronic ignition? What is this? I don't understand it. I don't get it. But with time, patience, and, you know, a little bit of education, it just becomes old hat, and you can just rock and roll with it. You know, in the 60s, they put a man on the moon, and we did it again. We're putting a person in space here recently, right? And you think about it, it can be done. Just take a deep breath. You know, there's always going to be the next best thing, the next level that may be overwhelming, but it's nothing that you can't do with a little bit of patience. It really isn't.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you this. With DIY Hemi, obviously you have a day job, and DIY Hemi is like your pet project on the side that's, I think, going to be really successful. Do you have a plan lined up? Because I imagine there's people out there that go, cool, yeah, it's really easy, neat. Blake, I don't have the time. I would rather just send you my car and do the swap for me. Like me, for instance. Hey, Blake, take my truck, do the swap for me, buddy. Is that something that you guys are looking at doing in
Right.
the future?
It's a possibility. Right now, because I, do have a day job and we want to maximize our efficiency, we're really about parts right now, parts and tutorials. I love getting my hands dirty. I love doing the swaps. I love learning new things. It's just not in the cards right now because, when you get a swap and you have a customer there, the way I work in my mind is that's my focus. You're my person. If you're paying me to do this installation on your car, I'm going to put everything aside. I'm going to get it knocked out and it's going to be perfect. It's got to be perfect when it leaves here. What that does is it takes that direct time and focus on, and I'm on one person, um, instead of helping a dozen people who have questions online, and instead of really developing R&D, getting those products out there that the community needs, I'm now in the weeds on one car because I'm a perfectionist. I got to get it just right before it leaves the door, right? Um, and it just, if you look at just the volume of service, it just doesn't do it, right now. Now, when we get big enough to where we have technicians that I can get guided through the process and they become comfortable with the whole Hemi swap activities, oh, absolutely. I love seeing cool stuff roll through the door. And I could still have that same level of perfectionism on a vehicle before it leaves the door. But right now, it's about helping the masses, and the masses is in email support. It's in the technical manuals. It's in these individual parts that we could ship all around the world. Right now, we just don't have the time for what I consider the level of work that a customer needs directly.
I completely understand that. And I mentioned it because I think it is definitely a possibility in the future because I just see there's just so many people that just don't have. I mean, it's hard to find time in today's world. You know, to live, you have to have a job that you're working at constantly.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like down in Louisiana, but up here, it's so expensive to live. I want to move to Texas or somewhere south, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. But it's just so expensive up here to live that I'm like, gosh, if I move somewhere a little bit cheaper, I could probably afford this hobby a little bit more. But that's a whole nother conversation. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many LS swap companies that I just, and people like you are making this swap so easy that I can't help but I see a lot of shops, yourself included, possibly, getting into this. And like I said earlier, I see more than just classic Mopars getting these swaps. I feel like it's coming.
Hmm.
There's a market there
Well, you're
somewhere
right.
for something.
I feel so. Yeah, and I'm sorry, man. I'm horrible with my time. You got to forgive me. But you're absolutely right. We get so many emails from people who want to swap late model Mopars. So, Jeeps is huge. Jeep persons love the Hemi swap, and they have some kits out there. We get questions on those on the daily. A lot of vehicles like your V6 Chargers and Challengers, people want to go up to, some more horsepower and really get that driving machine that they wanted, I guess, from the get-go. Um, we get those questions all the time, and that ties back into the time aspect. So with a full-time day job, answering emails, doing web support, doing R&D, doing all these things, we have to take baby steps, and it might be a couple days before we can get all of our emails returned. We're doing the best we can, and we want to. Man, I would love to write the entire book on Hemi swap. Say, oh, you have a 2003 Dodge with a 4.7. You want to go with a 6.1 in it now, or what have you? Yep, this is what you need to do step by step. I would love to get to that point, but it's all baby steps. And I think it's pretty cool. Insurance thinks you have a V6 Challenger and you have a Hellcat. I mean, hey, that's pretty cool. you know, I'm all for even the modern vehicles getting those swaps, and it's going to come with time.
Yeah, definitely. God, I didn't even think about that. Gosh, that's a whole nother conversation. So I guess that leads me to this question. How much more difficulty is involved in swapping a V6, we'll just say Charger with a V6, a modern Charger with a V6? Guy wants a Hemi, modern Hemi. How difficult is that swap versus, my 69 Coronet that I just want to put a modern Hemi in? How much, what's the learning curve there? Is it a lot more difficult, or?
That's a great question. I am so comfortable with the old school. It's very simple to me. Now, the new school, I know the theory in it just because of all the work that I've done in researching what goes into an old school. So when we're talking about like the NAG1 transmission, the NAG1, that's the one that people are really gravitating to, or the new 8 speeds, putting those in the classic cars, getting that understanding of, okay, well, how do we make this work? What are the inputs needed to make this work? Okay, well, we need the actual shifter out of the donor car because it has a module integrated in the shifter handle. We need the body control module. We need the front control module that ties into the ABS brakes, because we have to get speed signal to the ECM. It's, all these little pieces and modules, because if you want to run that very complex 8-speed transmission, you have to have all these factors, tied into the old school. It can be done. I think Sound German Automotive's a great company. They figured it out, and, through what I've done through my research to figure out how it works, it could be done for sure. But when we're talking about a newer vehicle, if you want to do that same activity, let's swap that 392 with an 8-speed into a V6 Challenger. Well, you have so much more technology in that newer Challenger. All those modules have to match. So in each specific module, it could be anything from the tire pressure sensor module, the body control modules, the RFID sensors, which route through the body control module, the ABS module, the transmission control module, the ECM. So the list goes on and on and on. All of those have to speak with one another over the CAN bus network. They all have to have matching programming, the matching VIN numbers. All those things have to speak with one another to be able to have the vehicle operate correctly. So if you were to just take the powertrain and bolt it right in, you had a wrecked one, you take the powertrain, bolt it right in. The ECM, you changed over from the V6 to the V8 ECM. They look physically the same. It's the GPEC2 ECM if it's a newer one. But the tuning and the programming is different. The VIN number and all that stuff, the information data set that's in those modules, it's different. So you go to fire that car up for the first time, and it probably won't do anything. It may not even start. So that's when you have to get dealer scan tools or very complex aftermarket scanning software, and you have to go in and reprogram all these modules to communicate with one another. If you have the tool set, those very expensive tools, it's not a heck of a lot more difficult than, say, an old school, but it adds a layer of complexity, to be honest. Because all these little computers all over the whole car have to talk with the new powertrain.
It just sounds to me like in a situation like that, I would say, hey, just get rid of the V6 car and go get yourself an SRT8 or an RT. Save yourself the trouble.
Well, right now you're right.
Yeah. I mean, who knows where the future is.
Right now you're right. It just
seems way more complicated. Plus, let's be honest here. The old metal with the modern engines are the rage, and I think they're going to be the rage for quite a few years to come. I don't think that that's going to change because a lot of people are just like, hey, I want something that I can jump in, turn that key once, no problem, fuel injected, runs great, but it has that old look. And, frankly, I don't know what this, this global warming and all this stuff, who knows what kind of standards they're going to put on emissions for these old carbureted cars. So, you may be so far ahead of the game here that, I've always predicted that they're going to put some sort of ridiculous tax on old classic cars that are still carbureted zero emissions vehicles. As far as I see them going, oh, you have an old, polluting machine. We're going to go ahead and tax you. You're going to have to pay X amount of money to drive that car. And for a lot of us, budget guys, who knows how much that tax is going to be? You know what I mean? I know in Japan, a lot of the Japanese cars get scrapped when they're only a few years old just because they have a tax for however old your car gets. They have some crazy tax that they tax you for having an older vehicle. So I just knowing our current political climate, I could see them somehow taxing the guys who, the gearheads. But that brings me to another question. A lot of people look at these modern Hemis and they go, okay, fuel injection. I'm not a fuel injected guy. I like carbs. Now I know that they do make manifolds that you can put on these modern Hemis and go carbs with them. How much does that change what you guys do as far as the wiring and all that stuff? Does it change it completely, or is that something that you still have? Your products are still good for? I'm just kind of curious because I've wondered what I'm going to do with my truck because, to be honest, I'm not a fan of the aesthetics of this plastic intake. I don't like it. And I would much rather just put a aluminum intake on it. That's one thing. That's my biggest complaint about the Hemis is the ones with the plastic
I get
intakes.
it.
That's why personally I like the 6.1. I think it looks awesome with the aluminum intake. But, that's just me. But I'm just curious, what if anything, as far as what DIY offers, does that change anything with wiring?
Yes, it does. So, you're not, you're no longer using the fuel injectors. So it's difficult for an OEM to compute a running engine without getting feedback from fuel injectors and the operating parameters that it needs, right? So these ECMs look for specific conditions, and when they sense faults, they'll go into a limp mode, or maybe they'll just cease to run altogether. So if you do want to run an old school carburetor, then yes, you would have to go to a different ignition system. So like I think Fast has a pretty good system out there. Not sure if Phytech has anything other than just their direct injection systems, but yeah, like your Holley, MSD, all those companies have carbureted applications. That's separate, and it's just because that's not how that factory ECM was designed. It was not designed for a carbureted application. I like them. I like them all. I mean, my personal belief is fuel injection was designed for a reason, and it's been around for it's been around since the 80s for a reason. Is you get better atomization of fuel, you get better fuel efficiency, you get better power. It's a better way to operate the engine, and you have better control over the engine. Do I still like carburetors? Yeah, sure, absolutely. But there's ways to get that look, that old school look, without having to go carburetor. So Joe Cohn, I think OC Performance, he's developed an aluminum manifold for the Gen 3s, and it's doing great. It looks a lot like an old school second Edelbrock aluminum manifold, and you actually can still utilize the factory throttle body. It's actually rotated to where it's kind of horizontal with the opening sticking straight up. It'll bolt to it. So with his manifold, you can run a carburetor if you want, or you could run a factory throttle body, put an air cleaner on top of it, and it looks completely old school, but you're still electronic fuel injection, running the factory ECM. Everything is operating to the best that it can efficiently, given the electronic system, but it gives you that old school look.
Okay, well, that just changed the game for me. I didn't know that existed. Now I have to. Great. Now I get to go down a rabbit hole after this interview. I get to go look at all that. Because like I said earlier, I really want to turbocharge this thing. And, with fuel injection, you get all the tunability is on a whole nother level when you get fuel injection involved. So that's kind of the fence I was on. I was like, do I make it simpler as far as wiring? Because like I said earlier, too, I'm an idiot when it comes to wiring and electronics. It's all foreign to me. So when you talk about CAN bus systems and connectors and all that stuff, I understand connector. Yeah, I understand what a connector does. But all this other stuff, I'm like, oh, that's a Mercedes logo. Yep, not touching it. But
oh no, it's got the voodoo.
Yeah. I don't know how to read this. But I think that in the long run, with DIY Hemi's help, I should be able to keep the fuel injection. And I guess I'll, now that I know I can make it look better, because like I said, it's just that plastic. I don't know. There's something about the plastic of the new cars that really kind of turns me off. But, we'll find a way around it. I'm sure that's one thing that bothers me too, is that with the '06 Hemi that I have, I've noticed that until what you're saying, I got to go check out this other manifold, but all the ones that I've been seeing from, Holly and whatnot, they're all for the newer Hemis and not necessarily the one that I have, which frustrated me a little bit because I was like, God, some of those manifolds look really nice. And I'm looking at the years and I'm like, oh, '09 plus, or whatever. So that's kind of frustrating, but I'm hoping that the aftermarket support for all the Hemis gets better in the next few years. We'll see.
Yeah, I would check Joe out. He actually may be a good guest for you in the future. He just really is a down to earth guy. He developed this intake manifold himself, and he's had phenomenal results. He races it. He attends a lot of the Mopar events. Really good guy. You talk to him, and he's knowledgeable. He's very friendly, and he has a great product. And I couldn't recommend him any more.
Awesome. Yeah, I will definitely reach out to him. Is there anything else you want to talk about as far as DIY Hemi? Anything else that you want everybody listening to know about the company?
No. Yeah, I guess if you want to get in touch with us, just please be patient. We answer our emails as much as possible. But we're going to have some opportunities to actually have some face-to-face, some seat time. We will be at Chrysler's at Carlisle in, is it July? The week of the 9th through the 11th, I believe. We'll be up there involved with the seminar for Gen 3 Hemi swap. So we'll be there. I think Joe will be there and a couple other professionals in the industry. If you want to just pull up a seat and have face-to-face, ask any question, no bars, that would be the place to go. So go out to Chrysler's at Carlisle, check us out there. After that, I think the next thing we have on the calendar is Mopars at the Coast down at the famous Cruising the Coast block party. So the Cruising the Coast week-long car show that takes place on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. We'll be down there for that Mopar event with some samples of our products, wiring harnesses on display, free tech help. If you're having some issues with your Hemi swap, come on down. We'll help you out.
Awesome, man. Yeah, there's so many shows out there. I've got a bucket list that's so big. Like Chrysler's at Carlisle, you think that a guy who has a podcast about Mopars, that would be like his go-to, and I would have already gone there for 10 years in a row, but I have not yet been to Chrysler's at Carlisle, and that's on my bucket list. It's one of the top on my bucket list. So that's actually a really cool. I didn't know that you were going to be there for that event, so that's really cool. So anybody that's going to Chrysler's at Carlisle, you owe it to yourself to go check out DIY Hemi and all those guys talking about Hemi swap stuff. That's very cool. Awesome, man. Well, let's stray away from DIY Hemi for a minute. Not that it's not cool. DIY Hemi's awesome. But I do like, as you know, with this show, I talk a lot about prices of Mopars, especially the classics and the project cars. I always like to see what people's opinions are on the current Mopar marketplace. So how do you see the current marketplace? Do you think these prices are out of hand? And what direction do you see this market headed? Are we on an upturn and the prices are just going to keep skyrocketing, or are we going to get some sort of a break sometime soon so that some of us, like myself, can get into these E bodies and V bodies? What do you think?
I think it's a great question. So, obviously with all the things going on in the world right now, I think we're going to see a slight drop in some of these prices, especially for the more desired ones, like a 70 B body. Oh my gosh, what would I do to have a 70 Roadrunner, right? You're going to see those drop just a little bit, but not for long. What Chrysler does that I think is great is they do something that no other manufacturer does, or at least not well. They drive the passion. I mean, the Demon. Hello. We got the Scat Packs. We got the 392 basically crammed in everything under the sun. You have the rumors of the Hellcat truck coming out. And, there's so many other manufacturers out there, foreign and domestic, that just play it safe. You don't see the high impact colors out there that Chrysler does. You don't see the focus on the youth, and that's a key component to the market of all Mopars in general. You go approach maybe a millennial, or I think it's what's it, Gen Z, the generation after millennial. You have to forgive me, I don't really know, but you go to these kids that are like in their teens and maybe early 20s, and you ask them, hey, you know what a Superbird is? And a lot of them may not be able to tell you, but they can tell you what a Demon is. They can tell you what a Shaker Challenger is, and that opens the floor for so much more education in the back history of what it is. So, the discussion is they're at a car show and they have a Shaker Challenger, and an older guy, maybe someone our age or a little bit older, comes up and says, "Yeah, I used to have a '70 Challenger with a bubble shaker on it." And then it kicks off the discussion. Wow, I never knew those things existed. So by keeping today's youth engaged, what it's going to do is it's going to continue to foster that relationship and help preserve the value of these older cars, the ones that a lot of us really enjoy. Will they kind of maybe plateau for a while? I think so. But at least they're not going to hit rock bottom. At least is the way I see it. They're not going to hit rock bottom where you can, buy a A12 car for $1,500 and a stick of bubble gum. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But it's the youth. It's all about the youth. You keep them engaged. The red-blooded young Americans out there buying those cars, and I think you always have that tied relationship.
Awesome. You actually answered the next question I was going to ask, which was, what are your thoughts on modern Mopars? So I won't ask that one now.
I want one. I know that.
Yeah, man, me too. I keep battling myself every day because, like I said, I'm a fan of those 6.1s, and they're older, but I've driven that 6.4. There's something about that 6.4 that is just monstrous. I don't know. I drove a 392, and that thing was it was an animal. I was like, I don't need this car. This is going to get me in some serious trouble. Like anything with a little power is going to get me in trouble. But that thing, it was, my wife and I took one out, and because my buddy used to be the sales manager at a Dodge dealership. So our little joke is I'll go into his little office and I'll go, "Hey, what do you got that's fast?" And he'll just reach on the keyboard and throw me something. So he threw me the keys to this 392, and my wife and I go out there and we get in it, and I look at her and I was like, "You've never actually ridden with me in a performance car." She's like, "No." And so I'm thinking, big shot. I'm like, "All right, I'm gonna show you how I can drive." Yeah. Right. So I had never really played with paddle shifters in one of those cars before. So the on-ramp to the freeway, it's like a really sharp right-hand corner and then a straightaway to the freeway. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm coming up on the corner and I'm like, "Oh, what is it? Paddle shift this sucker down and just let her rip, dude." Man, I about had a heart attack, dude. I thought it was on ice. That thing, because of course, when I got in it, I'm like, all right, sport mode on. Let's turn this traction control. That's a sissy button. We're going to turn that one off. And we're just going to see what the thing can do. Oh, man, I played it off really cool, but my butt was so puckered. Oh, my God. I was probably up off the seat. I was so puckered. I was like, oh, God. I'm trying to play it cool, and this thing's coming out. And I could just see my wife hanging on for dear life. And then once I got it under control and had it straight and realized I wasn't getting us killed, man, I put my foot in that thing, and it just – and the power of those things is just – it scares me to think that anybody with a big enough wallet or good enough credit can go buy a Hellcat or God forbid, Hellcat Red Eye or a Demon, for God's sakes. Anybody with money can go get one of those and have no idea what they're doing. And
oh no,
that's a scary thought for me. You know what I mean? That is scary.
But I will tell you this, I would definitely try it.
Oh yeah. I survived one once. I already survived one once. I may not take the sissy button off right away. I may just feel it out. But the red key's definitely going in that sucker, I'll tell you that. But yeah, so modern Mopars for me, yes, but I would never feel comfortable only owning modern Mopars. And to be honest, I don't think I'd ever be comfortable not having a Mopar project car. I could finish both of my cars in the garage, have a modern Mopar, and I'm still going to be on Craigslist late into the night trying to figure out that next car that I want to buy. It's a sickness, it's a disease, but this show and companies like DIY Hemi keep that sickness at bay. So thankfully, those resources are out there for people like us.
That was part 1 of my interview with Blake. Stay tuned for part 2.